From Flow Journey. Thatgamecompany have a penchant for showcasing innovative and beautiful ways of telling stories. Now the studio is working on a multiplayer game, Sky, and at the 2019 Game Developers Conference you will get to see how they rebuilding its narrative structure to evoke emotion. As part of the GDC 2019 Game Narrative Summit, Thatgamecompany writer Danny Kong will be presenting a talk on evolving emotional storytelling in Thatgamecompany's Sky, which should help illuminate how the studio builds emotional narratives. Using key examples from the development of Sky, a game anchored in connection and altruism, Kong will present the studio's unique reiterative method to finding the emotional engine for their story and player narrative. This includes a look at the studio's approach on evolving the linear structure to create multiplayer emotion, creating a world with layered, nonverbal story content, and crafting compassionate behavior within a community through beta testing narrative design. Do not skip it. For more details on this talk, and many more, check out GDC 2019 session scheduler. There you can begin to lay out your GD week, which takes place March 18th through the 22nd at the newly renovated Moscow Center in San Francisco. Bring your team to GD, register a group of 10 or more and save 10% on conference passes. Learn more here. For more details on GDC 2019 visit the show's official website, or subscribe to regular updates via Facebook, Twitter, or RSS. Gamasutra and GD are sibling organizations under parent company Informa. Naughty Dog is known for shipping games that are both engaging and highly cinematic, and at next year's Game Developers Conference in March you will get an inside look at how the magic is made. Specifically, you will get to see Naughty Dog's story. Animator Mary Ann Hayden pull back the curtain on the design of Uncharted. The Last Legacy's charming cinematographer felt riding her game narrative summit session on design versus story. How Uncharted, The Last Legacy, addressed the elephant in the room. This promises to be a fun, informative talk that will give you an inside look at the story and design process at Naughty Dog. You will learn from both a design and production standpoint how an animal originally intended as background became a vital part of the narrative, and the useful vehicle for bonding two characters together. For more details on this talk, and many more, check out the GDC 2019 session scheduler. There you can begin to lay out your GD 2019, which takes place March 18th through the 22nd at the newly renovated Moscow Center in San Francisco. Bring your team to GD, register a group of 10 or more and save 10% on conference passes. Learn more here. For more details on GDC 2019 visit the show's official website, or subscribe to regular updates via Facebook, Twitter, or Gamasutra and GD are sibling organizations under parent company Informa. Each of Sega's Yakuza games contains modded use. For example, Yakuza 0, the series prequel released on the side of Japan early last year, sets itself up as a playable crime serial set in 80s Japan. But it can also be a cabaret management game, a blind date sim, a 3D beat 'em up, an emulator of old Sega arcade classics, a rhythm game, a light-hearted RPG about solving strangers' problems, a real estate management game, and a surprisingly good place to learn the basics of tabletop games, like shogi and mahjong. From a developer's perspective, the scope of such a project seems daunting. From a player's perspective, it can be overwhelming. My partner, and I recently completed Yakuza 0, and saw that our 87 hours of combined play merited a completion score of roughly 33%. The hook that holds together all these disparate game design elements that put us on the scores of Western players like us through the game is the writing. For all its focus on cold-hearted criminals and petty evil, Yakuza 0 is a remarkably funny game. It affords players the freedom to quickly jump from incredibly serious, macabre scenes, a criminalist tortured in a warehouse, to a teacher shy punk band to act like good rude dudes in public. That writing is translated and localized for the West by Atlas, alongside longtime series translator Inbound, starting with Yakuza 0 and continuing on through Yakuza Kiwami, the remake of the original 2005 game, and Yakuza 6. The localization of all three games has been overseen by Atlas Scott Strickhardt, who recently sat down to chat about the ins and outs of adapting these games, humor and gravity for Western players. It was an interesting conversation that went beyond the localization process. Atlas uses a translator-editor tag-team approach, rather than relying on translators alone, to touch on how exactly you translate humor, and how players in different regions can view a game, its characters, completely differently. What follows is a version of that conversation we have edited for clarity. Strickhardt, the humor of a Yakuza game, is a fine line to walk. It's very clear when the developers want to be funny. It's very clear to us when the writing that exists in the game is supposed to be like, haha, here's a joke. So we just want to make sure that if they intended for it to be funny, it also has to be funny to our audience. Whether or not that means changing the dialogue a little bit, changing the style in which it's delivered, making dialogue options a little bit more punchy, that kind of thing. One of the perfect examples is, in Yakuza 0, Majima encounters this. Did you play the sub-story where he goes to infiltrate a cult? In that sub-story, one of the options he has is to crack a pen, in order to get this girl to snap out of her cult tendencies. So in Japanese, that pun is futon or futon dog, which means a futon is a futon, or a futon flies. It's a pen on wheels. It's basically a why did the chicken cross the road kind of joke. If we literally translated that, it would not work. If we put in, why did the chicken cross the road, it's not much of a pen. It does not feel in line with Majima's character. So that's where we had to come up with this pen that we ultimately went with, which was, how do you avoid dangerous cults? Practice safe sex. Well, it was not just me. We have a team of translators and editors who approach these games. These games are massive. If they were left to just me, I'd be buried under each of these games for years. Most of these Yakuza games actually are on par, are greater than your average drug. In terms of volume of text, Yakuza 0 is 1.8 million JPC, Japanese characters, and the average drug is, I think, 1 million to 1. So we were well above the average there. So anyway, how our process works is, the scripts come in from Japan, and we divide them up to certain translators and editors to make sure there's consistency among the sections that they are doing. So that particular pen was in a sub-story, for instance. So the translation team who was on that was one of our outsourced translators, who was doing most of the Majima sub-stories. Because they were familiar with Majima as a character, they were familiar with the sub-story content, and all that kind of stuff. These kinds of localization issues, we do not know about them until we hit them. We are doing it line by line, and suddenly we are like, oh shit, here's a pen. And when you hit that, You have to take a step back and say, okay, this is not going to be a direct translation. We have to deal with it sometimes. That comes down to a discussion amongst editors and translators. Sometimes the translator will flag it for the editor to say, I didn't know what to do with this. Man, let's talk about this. So when that gets to the editor's job might be to come up with a way to make that pen palatable to the Western audience. That's generally the Atlas approach. Is we use editors to refine the translated English text to make sure it makes sense to Western players. A lot of companies do not do it this way, and it's not right or wrong. But a lot of companies dedicate a single translator who has the ability to translate Japanese to English and make it good English. Whereas we use a method where the translators give an editor